This is the XVive U5 wireless microphone system. So I'm gonna unbox it quickly, just so that you see what actually comes in the box. So there's this pouch, it's a leather pouch, and then there's the manual, and the warranty card leaflet, and also a product catalog, I think, with different things that XVive produces. And oops, this came off. This is the receiver for the microphone system. And here's the transmitter. And a USB-A to 2 micro USB ports. So it's a split cable. And a TRS to TRS cable for connecting to the camera. A lav microphone. And 2 batteries. So the batteries seem to be the same for both the transmitter and the receiver, and their batteries are replaceable, which is always a good thing. Both of the batteries for the transmitter and the receiver can be charged either inside the transmitter and receivers using the micro USB port, or alternatively there's a separate charger that you can purchase for the batteries, and you can place 3 batteries in that charger and charge the batteries outside of the transmitter and the receiver. And that's pretty much all that comes in the box. The transmitter, the receiver, the lav mic. So the model number for the lav mic is LV1. And there's a lav mic clip and a foam as well for the lav mic, which has been squashed up here. So the lav mic is an omnidirectional condenser microphone. And the nice thing about it is that it has a locking mechanism. So you lock it into the transmitter, and the transmitter has the port for being able to lock the lav mic into it, which is really good, because I see a lot of these wireless transmitters that don't have a locking mechanism, and obviously the lav mic can come out quite easily. So the lav mic weighs 13 grams, and apparently this cable is 1.6 meters, which is really long. And the 2 batteries, each of them weigh 23 grams, and the model number for them is U5B, so one for the transmitter and one for the receiver. Push this upwards and that opens up, and I'm gonna insert the battery into this. Okay, it goes into place, and I lock it, and then okay, the battery compartment is different on the receiver than on the transmitter. So one of the interesting things about these transmitters and receivers is that you don't need to have the battery inside. You can just run it off a micro USB port. So if you plug in a USB cable which is providing power, then they run without having a battery, and you can replace the batteries anyway. So the nice thing about that is that these transmitters and receivers will essentially always be functional. You don't need to rely on a built-in battery that can't be replaced easily, or it will be too costly to replace it. So you can either replace the batteries, or if you don't even want to replace the batteries easily, then you can just run it off of USB power. And this is a USB-A to 2 micro USB ports, one for charging or running each of these devices. So one for the transmitter and one for the receiver. And this is the 3.5mm TRS cable, so you can use this to connect the receiver to a camera. And the cable for this is interesting because it's one of those memory cables, so whatever shape you give it, it will just stay in that shape. So the dimension of the transmitter is 6.5 centimeters by 5.1 centimeters by 3.4 centimeters. So 3.4 centimeters thick, 5.1 centimeters wide, and 6.5 centimeters tall. And it weighs 52.2 grams without the battery, but the battery weighs 23 grams. So if you add that up, that's 78 grams, or 78.2 grams to be exact. And the dimensions of the receiver is 6.5 centimeters tall and 5.4 centimeters wide and 4.4 centimeters thick. So the main thickness comes from obviously the dials on top and the cold shoe here. And this one weighs 53 grams without the battery. So if you add the 23 grams of the battery, then you get 76 grams. So the transmitter has a display, and the display shows the battery power level, the channel selected, the gain, whether it's clipping or not, and whether it's muted or not. And there's a separate power status LED for it. So I don't know if you can see that there. When the power is running out, it will signal to you when the power is running out. And the power switch is on the side. So in order to turn it on or turn it off, you have to hold it in this direction, and then it will switch off. And the same thing for when you want to turn it on. So if you just do this once, put it back once, it's not going to turn on. You need to pull it back and hold it for a few seconds, then it turns on, as you can see here. And there's a hold option as well, which locks all the keys on the transmitter. So if I move it there, it stays there, and none of the buttons will work when I press them. So that's quite useful to make sure you don't accidentally press any of the buttons when wearing this. So to go over the physical aspects of this transmitter, it has a belt clip, which is made out of metal, and the battery compartment, which I showed earlier anyway. And here you have the power button, the hold or lock button. And on this side is the micro USB port for powering the device if you don't want to use batteries. And here you have the buttons for mic or line input. So this is one of the interesting things about this transmitter. You can choose whether you want mic or line input here. And this is a locking port, so it's safe and secure in that sense that the microphone or line input will stay there. And then there's the channel button and the plus and minus, which you can use to control the gain, and the mute button. So if I press the mute button, it comes on. If I press it again, unmute it. And similar thing for the mic and line. When you press it, it becomes blue. So I think this is quite a clever way of having buttons with LEDs in them. You press the button and you immediately see whether it's on or not on that very button, instead of requiring to take up more space with an LED in a separate position or showing that information on the screen. So I think this is quite nice. And that's pretty much it. It's actually really simple. Everything has physical buttons that you want to use. And this one is a switch which moves into place when you put it in the hold or lock position. And you can switch it back, and you can put it down and hold it to switch off the device. So very simple to use. And then on the receiver you have very similar features, but obviously from a receiver perspective. So you have the power button, which you pull and hold to turn it on, and it turns on. So this can receive from two separate transmitters. I only have one transmitter here, but you can have two transmitters with the same receiver. So aside from the transmitter, which you can connect a lav mic to, you can also purchase an XLR transmitter. So that will connect to the same receiver. So what you could do is have one of these transmitters with a lav mic and also use a handheld microphone at the same time. So you'd have two microphones. Let's just say you're interviewing people. You could have the lav mic on yourself and use the handheld microphone for the person that you're interviewing. And you have the hold button here as well. So if I push this forward, then nothing should work. So if I move these dials, nothing happens. So if I pull it back, now you can see that I can control the gain. And there's the mono or stereo button. So you can choose whether you want mono or stereo. So if you choose mono, the output from the receiver will mix the two lines coming from the two channels. Or even if it comes from one channel, it will mix the lines and then output it to your camera. But if you select stereo, then each of the channels will be kept separately. So you can use one as a backup channel, or you can use it with two separate transmitters. So if you sent it to stereo and you want to have one channel as a backup, then you can use the dials on this to adjust your gain so that you reduce the gain on one of them to whatever you want, and then the other one you keep as high as you want. So you have really fine-grained control over exactly what the gain is for your backup track. And then on the front you have the screen, and here you can select the channel, and here you can mute, so you can mute one channel and not the other one, or you can mute both of them at the same time, and you can choose the channel that you want to have. So here you can see I'm just switching between channels, so channel 1, channel 3, 4, 5, 6. And then on this side is the output. Again, it has the locking port. Both the transmitter and the receiver support line level audio, input and output. So you don't necessarily need to use mic level input. So for this, you can have a mic there, or you can have a line level audio input. And on the receiver, you could have a microphone level output or a audio line output level. So typically, if you're connecting this receiver to cameras, on the camera menu, you'd have an option where it says whether the microphone will need power or not. And that's the one that you can change on your camera in order to adjust for this. And then you can also adjust it on this, whether you want to have line level or microphone level output. And on the bottom, it has a cold shoe. And there's the battery compartment. So you press these two and open it, as I did previously. And you can use it with micro USB, and you don't even have to have the batteries inserted. So the whole thing works just through USB ports. And the USB port only requires 5 volts at 2 amps, so pretty much any power bank or adapter or charger will be able to provide that. And in terms of the information which is shown on the display, you have the RF channel, the input gain, the audio input, whether it's clipping or not. And then you have the mute indicators, and you also have the battery level. And on the receiver, you'll be able to see both the battery levels of the transmitters as well as the battery level on the receiver. And just like the transmitter, there's a separate power LED here. So that's the one which would indicate to you when the power is running out. So the nice thing about that is if you have the receiver at waist level and you can't see the screen, you will still be able to see this light. And it can give you an indication of what the status of this device is. According to XVive, the delay on this is 6 milliseconds, and it can be used for 5 hours, and that's for both of them. And the range is around 30 meters. So I'm gonna plug the microphone into the transmitter, and I'm gonna lock it in place, and I'm gonna turn on the transmitter. Just hold it down until it comes on, and here you can see that it says channel 2. So here we have channel 2, so you can see that it's green, and I don't have anything on channel 1. So you have the channel here, which is set to channel 2, as you can see, and it's really easy to change the channel. So if I press the channel button, I'll go to channel 3, let's say, and it's no longer connected, so the light will go off. So if I press the channel button on the transmitter now to go to the 3rd channel, then you see that the light on this one switches on. So it's really easy to operate. And you also get to see the battery levels on the transmitter here and the battery levels of the receiver itself as well, which is shown in the middle. And you can mute the line here, and you can mute both of them. So in this case, both of them get muted at the same time because I only have one transmitter. But if I set this to stereo, then I could mute just one side. So I'm going to set this to stereo and just mute this side. So what will happen is the audio going out from this device now will just be on one side and not the other one. So I'm going to plug this into the output for this one. And I'm going to plug this into my camera. And then I'm going to continue talking through this microphone so that you can hear the quality of the sound. Okay, so I've been experimenting a little bit with this microphone, and what I have right now is I have the mono stereo button on the mono side, and both of the channels are unmuted. So if I mute one channel on the receiver, even though that channel is not in use in terms of a transmitter being connected to it, the output from the receiver will be muted on that particular channel. So I have to unmute both the left and the right channels so that both of them actually go into the camera. And here you can see the audio level gains. So if I want to change this, I can do so with the buttons here. So if I reduce it, Now I'm going to reduce it just so that you can see that it's being reduced and the audio levels should go down. Okay, so it looks like -6 dB is as far down as you can go on the transmitter. And let's go up all the way to see how far up it goes. Okay, the maximum you can go up to on the transmitter is 12 dB. So you can see that there. So I'm going to reduce it to 0 because that seemed to have been fine. So to summarize the main advantages of the U5 microphone system, I would say first of all, that has replaceable batteries. I think that's really important for a microphone system, so that you know that you don't have to throw away your equipment after a while. You can just change the batteries. Another thing which is also a big advantage is that you can plug in the USB cable into the micro USB port on both the transmitter and the receiver, and they will function, and then the battery which is inside it will just function as a backup in case you unplug the USB port. And if you didn't want to use batteries at all, you can just plug it into a USB power source and it will work perfectly fine. You don't even need to have batteries inside the device. Aside from the screens on the transmitter and the receiver, there's also this LED here which indicates the level of power. So if the batteries hold more than 30% charge, these LEDs will be off. If they are between 11% and 29%, it will be a solid red. And if it's less than 10%, it will be a flickering red to get your attention. And one of the nice things about this receiver, as well as the transmitter, is that they have the screen on this side, which indicates the power level anyway, for both the receiver and the transmitter. And on top as well, it has the LED. So if you have this mounted on camera at waist level, you'd see the LED blinking or being red, so you know that you need to supply it with power. And if you have this receiver and your camera set up at eye level, then you'll be able to see the screen anyway, which should tell you the battery levels. So irrespective of the positioning of your camera and your receiver, you'll be able to see the power levels of the device continuously to make sure that you take any necessary action if it's needed. Another advantage of this device is that it has a locking port. So when you attach a lav mic to it, you can lock it in place. And I think that's really important because when you wear these transmitters on your belt, it's probable that the microphone can come off by accident. So it's really good to have these locking ports on the transmitter and the receiver. Now, another thing which I haven't seen in many wireless microphones is that the input port can be used both as a line in as well as a microphone line. So there's a button here, and if I press this, it will change to line level. So when it's blue, it's line, and when there's no light, it's mic level. So if I press this, you can see that the blue was line level, and I didn't speak during that time, obviously, because that was a line level input that was being sent. So you can have a line in coming from a different audio source into this as opposed to a microphone. Another advantage of this system is that it's really light. So it's made from plastic, but I don't see that as a disadvantage. I think that's an advantage because plastic will make it both light and relatively cheap. Whereas if it was made from metal, for example, or carbon fiber, it would potentially be more expensive. And if it was made from metal, then it would also be heavier as well. So that's really good. That is quite light. And the audio quality on it is really good as well. So it's 24-bit audio as opposed to 16-bit audio. The most appealing thing about this microphone system to me is that everything is really intuitive and easy to use. So for example, you have this hold button here, which locks all the keys. And it's a switch as opposed to something where you have to hold the button down for so long or press a button multiple times for it to work or to disable it or enable it. And I prefer these buttons that are intuitive and you know immediately what you need to do. And the same thing here. So you have the mic and line level is a button and the LED at the same time. So when you switch it to line level, you immediately see the button turn blue. And then you have one button for the channel selection, and then the minus and plus for controlling the gain, and then a button for the mute. So if you press that, it will go red. Okay, I just unlocked it, and now I'm gonna press the mute button. And you saw that it went red when the mute was on. And then you have the screen information as well. So you can see the battery levels and the channels and the gain and so on. So that's also really good. And on the receiver, which is right now connected to my camera, there's two knobs. So I'm going to just show it on this box because I have the receiver connected to my camera now. So you have the left and right knobs, which you can use to adjust the volume from each channel. And I think that's really good. There's a physical button for those things. So everything is really intuitive with this whole system. There's nothing which is difficult or that you need to look up the manual. Now I'm going to switch back to my microphone on the camera. In terms of disadvantages for this device is that the transmitters don't actually have a recordable format on them, so you can't record the audio on the transmitters. So if there was a connection problem or radio interference, then you wouldn't actually have a recorded copy on the transmitters. Another thing which might be slightly annoying is that the USB port on these ones are micro USB as opposed to USB-C. So you need to make sure that you have a micro USB cable. I mean, it comes in the box. It's just a question of whether you remember to carry a micro USB cable with you when you want to power these things. And if you want to power them separately, then you need two separate micro USB ports, because this one is one USB-A to two micro USB ports. So if they're in close proximity, that's fine. But if you have them in different locations, then you need two separate micro USB cables. Another thing which I've seen done differently is that the receiver only has one output, whereas sometimes I see receivers having two output, one for monitoring and one for outputting to the camera. But the way to overcome this is that you can monitor the audio output from the camera as opposed to monitoring it from the receiver. I've heard some people complain that the cold shoe on this is really close to the device itself and the wheel here is not big enough, so it can be difficult to reach when you attach it on top of a camera. Although I have a camera which has a cage on it and this protruded cold shoe anyway, but even so, I still find it difficult to tighten the screw on the cold shoe here. I mean, it's doable, but it's just not easy. So there you have it. It's just that the wheel is a bit small. I think that's the main problem, and everything is too tight. And it doesn't make a difference the fact that I have it on a cage and a separate cold shoe receiver here, or whether you're doing it on the camera. I think it would be even worse if it was on the camera because you have too many things, whereas here there's some clearance. I think the way to get around opening or closing this is to just use one finger as opposed to using two fingers. That would make it a little bit easier. Now, another thing I've heard people complain about is the battery compartment door on the transmitter. So some people say that this battery compartment door can be opened quite easily or by accident. So let me switch this off first before I open it. Okay, so here you can see that if I push this up, it opens. But to me, it doesn't really make a difference, because even if this door does open, the battery doesn't come out of place. So you literally have to pull the battery out for it to come out of place. So even if the door did open, it's not going to impact the operation of this. So my evaluation of this wireless microphone system is that it's really easy to use, really intuitive. It has physical buttons and dials for everything, and you can't really go wrong with it. That's the main advantage to this system as opposed to other systems. So the ergonomics is really good. I mean, even the cables are the ones that take shape, so they've thought to that level. But obviously, if there are features that this doesn't have and you need those features, then you need to look for alternatives. But in terms of ergonomics and usability, I think these devices are really good. In terms of range, they claim a range of 30 meters. I didn't do a range test because with these type of devices, I don't expect a huge range, and I use these devices within close proximity to the camera, so this is not a problem for me. And the other thing is also to consider is the laws of physics. So if you're inside the room, the radio frequency will bounce off the walls to the receiver, whereas if you're in an open space, that's not going to happen. So the range might be different. And the other thing is also, if you go to an area which is crowded, there would be problems with the amount of people that are in between the transmitter and the receiver. So that's one problem. And the second problem is the amount of interference coming from other people's devices on the similar radio frequency band. So those are the two main problems that I tend to look out for when I'm using wireless microphones as opposed to the range. Anyway, let me know what you thought of the quality of the audio. And also if you have any questions about this, or if you want me to do any further testing.